welcome back to the Hope Dems podcast, your go-to source for fresh ideas and insights into making our great state of North Carolina even better. Joined by my co-host, William Munn, chairman of the Hoke County Democratic Party, as always. William, you nervous about the Philadelphia schedule, or you ready for another 8-8 season and early playoff exit already?
I think we're gonna go. I think we're gonna win 14, man. I think we're gonna win 14, and we'll safely win the NFC East because we don't have very much competition.
Well, we'll see. Sorry, I froze there for a second. Didn't hear any of that. I was ready for more trash talk, but unfortunately, like Dak Prescott in the playoffs, I froze. So today we're thrilled to have a special guest with us, Kathy Batt, your candidate for the North Carolina State Senate. District 24 is joining us. Kathy, or Batgirl, as her supporters have dubbed her, is a U.S. Army veteran, recognized as the first woman by the U.S. Army to fly in combat during Operation Urgent Fury in Grenada. She then served 20 years as a special agent in the FBI. She served a brief retirement before coming back to public service and is currently running in Senate District 24, covering Hoke, Robeson, and Scotland counties. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Well, let's start with a bit more about you. Pause for applause, my bad. Let's start with a little bit more about you. How has your service, both in the military and the FBI, affected the way you view politics, and what led you to throw your hat in the ring and run this year?
Well, I served my country for 31 years, first in the Army and then in the FBI. And I made a lot of sacrifices because I believed in the idea that is the United States. And while in the Army, I learned firsthand that a number of other soldiers did not share my vision of liberty and justice for all. During a barracks inspection, a surprise barracks inspection, we found Nazi and other white supremacy materials in one of our barracks. I learned that there's a network of soldiers who were out there to get, not to serve the country, but to further their own agendas and get training, tactical training. Now, I felt good about how the Army used the Uniform Code of Military Justice to handle this situation and put all those guys out. So I did not believe that people like those soldiers would ever gain a foothold. But then in 1995, Timothy McVeigh blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City and killed 168 people. Some of them with women, children, and babies. A short time later, like the next year, I joined the FBI. Again, thinking the country that I fought for was not in danger of being toppled by extremists. Then I was assigned to a squad that investigated organized crime in New York City. It was challenging to bring a criminal case, but I managed to get a racketeering case indicted. It was scheduled to go to trial in October 2001. But everybody knows what happened on September 11th, 2001, and that put criminal cases on hold. It was a terrible time, but I felt like we got through it together. It was good to be an American. The world was behind us fighting terrorism, and there was an emphasis on investigating foreign terrorism for a long time, and that really felt right. But eventually, over a couple of years, some of us in the FBI became aware of the rise of domestic terrorism. And it took the FBI a long time to pivot and focus on that. So in 2020, I had retired from the FBI. I was working for the Board of Elections on Election Day. And my job was to keep order. And it was more of a social visit with my neighbors. Then crazy white guys in a camouflage pickup, wearing camouflage gear, drove by brandishing assault rifles. It freaked everybody out. But they just drove by and they didn't come back. So, didn't really think of it, but I was kind of thinking something might happen during the inauguration. So I was surprised on January 6th, the coup attempt, but apparently a whole lot of people knew what was going to go on, and it doesn't seem like anybody did anything about it. And it was, all of this was on my mind when I was asked to consider running for North Carolina Senate in this district. And for those reasons, I couldn't say no. And also, there was only a Republican running in this seat who votes lockstep with the National Republican Party, who pretty much led that coup. So that's why I'm running, and I'm running to help this district also. So that's why.
It doesn't get talked about enough just how much that extremism exists, in what are supposed to be our sort of most trusted parts of our government. As someone who has finished his time in the Army as of this morning, actually, it is incredible. And I, as much as I have, so much respect for 98% of people in the armed services, like those 2%, like there is an extremism problem. There is that problem. There are people who don't want to see the same America exist today that we do. They don't like multiracial democracy. They don't like freedom of the press, freedom of protest. They want everyone to like and think the way they do. And if not, they're not welcome here. And that's what we got to fight against. So,
Absolutely.
what a compelling story. And thank you for getting involved.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. It's something I had to do for me, too.
Yeah. Well, so as you alluded to already, calling you an upgrade to our current representation in the state Senate would be an understatement. Once you win this November and you're sitting in the State House in Raleigh, what are the areas of focus? What are your areas of focus on policy?
Well, I have a number of things that I think really need to be improved in this district, the 3 counties. But by far and away, the most critical is public education. And it's an issue facing the entire state of North Carolina because of the lack of funding that the state gives the counties. And the counties, our district, all 3 counties, don't have a property tax base that would allow us to put a bigger allotment to support public education. And then instead of giving extra money to our district and other poor districts, North Carolina, the legislature, the Republican-led legislature, is defunding public education. They're taking money out of public education and giving it to private hands. To this year, they've taken $1 billion, $1 billion out of that fund. And I've been to school boards. I've read the minutes of the other school boards, all of it about funding. Every single county, all 3 counties, have a deferred maintenance list that they cannot afford to address. And teacher pay is so low that the base teacher pay that the state gives is near the bottom in the country. And then you look at it at Hoke and Scotland and Robeson, don't have enough money to give a better supplement to teachers, and we're bleeding teachers. I know that Robeson County lost 150 teachers last year. I'm not sure how many Hoke and Scotland lost, but there's a net loss for all 3 counties, and they're propping it up with substitute teachers who, when they first start, they're getting like $15 an hour, and they don't have to be qualified. In fact, in some cases, it's just sort of like having a babysitter. It's like it's somebody to keep the kids in line. And there are schools in this county, in this district, every day that don't even have enough like substitute teachers for 1 teacher in every class. So the way this is going, the wealthier counties are going to be able to get by for a while as the school fund dwindles. But by 2033, by the legislature's own estimate, they're going to be taking $5 billion out of the public school fund. Now, public schools have fixed costs. No matter what you do, how many students you have, that public school building still sits there. The buses, the equipment, all of that stuff, if you don't fix it, you lose it. So that's going to be a huge problem with the big Robeson County's the biggest county in the state. If they start cutting down on classes, they're going to have to buy more buses because they're going to have to be busing kids a long way to get to school. And they're putting the money into private hands that we don't know what they're teaching those kids. They don't have to say. They don't even have to test them. And it has been reported that in all 3 counties, there are private schools who have more vouchers than they have students. And when that's brought up, oh, that's just an accounting area. We'll fix that accounting error. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to fix that accounting error. So, like, those tax dollars are our tax dollars leaving the public school fund and going into private hands. And that's got to stop. So that's my first thing that I'm going to get up there and work really hard to do, is to stop that, to stop vouchers. And I don't have anything against private school. You want to send kids to private school? Great. Send them to private school. Pay for it yourself. It's like, well, we all should have a car, and maybe I should give you some tax money so you can buy a BMW and I'll drive a Volkswagen 1962 Beetle. That's not right. So that's my big issue. I'll work on other things too, but that would be the thing I bang my head against first.
No, I think that from you're running to represent 3 counties in southeastern North Carolina, all 3 of which have deep socioeconomic challenges, and so public education really is the bedrock and the path forward for economic development and equitable prosperity across the board. On a previous podcast, we talked with Daniel French about this about the defunding, purposeful defunding of public schools,
right.
When it was just being it was a concept then, but certainly now it's being moved forward. And we're hearing things like failing public schools. And we all know that, since the Republicans took over in 2010, they have intentionally kneecapped the public schools time and time again. And I want to say this loud and clear for our audience. Southern legislatures, Republican legislatures, take their orders or marching orders from ALEC, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Commission, which is essentially a policy shop funded by, billionaire, and this is open, everyone knows who they are, billionaire Koch brothers and all those other folk, to create model legislation to change society in the South. And so you'll hear something crazy come out of Texas, and the next thing you know, it's happening in Mississippi, in Alabama, in South Carolina. I almost said South America, but South Carolina in rapid succession. Then you'll see a little tweak for North Carolina because North Carolina is slightly more progressive than the rest of the old Confederacy. But that's because the legislation's already been written. There used to be a organization that both aisles of state legislators would go to and sort of figure out how to build legislation that was sort of middle of the road. And so the Republicans abandoned that in mass and then decided to go with ALEC. I say all that to say it's a long way of getting there. I think part of their long-term goal is resegregation, and the easiest way to do the resegregation of the future is to funnel kids away from the public schools, which is and always has been since integration reflective of society. And so what we have now is the incentivized system in my eyes of de facto resegregation, and it's frustrating to watch. So I want to say that explicitly clear. What we're seeing now is our legislators betting on the latent racism and fear of brown and black people. And then if you label something failing with the racial undertones, it gets stuck in people's hair. And so watch out for those buzzwords and be ready to push back against the audience. So I think I think it's going to be challenging to push back against, a lot of what the legislature is doing. Are there any innovative things to come to your mind that communities like Hoke, Robeson, and Scotland can do in lieu of state funding for schools? Is there a role for the federal government, lobbying of the federal government to step up and help fund public schools? Maybe that's we've seen where the federal government has had to make direct investments to local governments because Southern governments have done all they can do to stop money and resources flowing to Black and Brown communities. What comes to mind, in terms of resource allocation or resource systems that can help circumvent what we know is a 10-year plan by the Republican legislature?
Well, I want you to get your Kleenex out because I'm about to tell you bad news. That money that's in the federal system that has been coming to counties like those in our district to plug the funding gaps, especially like for disabled children and like rural teacher supplements, that's going to end because this year, 2024, Mike Johnson and the Republican-led House of Representatives tried to eliminate $22 million from that fund that you were just talking about that comes to these counties. And if a Republican wins the presidency and if they get a super majority, or even if it's just one house, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And I'll add to that, like the legislature, the North Carolina Republican-led legislature is reducing the corporate income tax to zero. That's minus $2 billion. And they're talking about lowering taxes. Well, that, I don't know what private schools are going to do. That $2 billion out, I don't know how they're going to fund private schools at that point. And at some point, like there's this book, Schoolhouse Burning. I just got it. I haven't finished reading it yet. But it just exactly what you're talking about. Like back when Brown versus the Board of Education was first passed, that was North Carolina's like sneaky way, like, oh, we'll do private schools and we'll cause segregation by, private schools and like only white people will be able to get in them. Well, we're going back to that. And I think you're exactly right. I think it's on purpose. And, they have pet women, that are good. They say, oh, women are bad. They're stupid, except for you. They're doing that to Black people too, and people of color. You got your Tim Scott, you've got your
Absolutely.
Lauren Boebert. They're just pets. They're just pets to the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have anything that I can say to make you feel better because I don't think there is anything. But what can we do about it? We can do the same thing that we did to HB 237, where they wanted to weaponize mask wearing and scare people into thinking they're going to be arrested for terrorists if they try to take care of themselves. You got to just keep going. I've been writing op-eds. I'm going to keep writing op-eds. We need to have these podcasts. We just need to keep at them, bang out like one thing after another, pointing out what they're doing. And if history like tells us anything, eventually the lower class, the poorer people will catch on and go, wait a minute, we're not going to get our share. Nothing's going to trickle down. And then they'll step up, maybe unionize more, maybe actually vote, for people who are trying to help them, So that's the only thing I can throw out to you is that if the people of North Carolina, of District 24, don't want this to happen, then they've got to step up to the plate. Right now, I don't think they're going to, but they could prove me wrong and I could be elected, and Shonda Hooper, running from Robeson County, and Garland Pierce, he could be elected again. The three of us would be a start of trying to make things better. But that's really about all I can say. I don't really have any good news or any answers other than that, so we just have to live with it.
I think it's a great point to bring up that like democracy is it's you have to participate. No one gets a participation trophy here. Like if you don't win, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And if you don't win, you're not going to affect the change. I lived in El Paso, Texas, which was Beto O'Rourke's district when he ran for Senate in 2018. And he got close. He got closer than a Democrat's gone in Texas in a long time. And I remember people saying to me, oh, well, no, like this is good energy. Like this is going to keep going. Like we're going to build on this. And I said, no, we're not, because we lost.
Right.
What people learned in Texas in 2018 is, well, not yet. I guess let's lay low for a little while,
Yeah.
because we live in essentially a Christian theocracy. And if you stand up, there's a good chance you'll be mowed down.
Yeah.
Because all the
That's
police can do is they can't defend the
yeah.
schools, but gosh, they can always, abuse people on a college campus.
Yeah.
We, the Hoke Dems podcast, we like to call a spade, and I
Yeah.
appreciate saying
We
that.
do.
Yeah.
We do.
You're exactly right. Like, if you don't like what's happening in your public schools right now, I mean, I guess I would suggest throwing the bums out of office who are doing it to your public schools.
Right.
This isn't happening in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So
It's
in that
happening in
vein,
front of our eyes, but
yeah,
people don't want to see it because it has never been this bad in their lifetime. I'm 65. It was worse than this when I was a kid. I saw those drinking fountains that were white only. I saw those beaches that black people couldn't go on, the lakes black people couldn't go to. I saw all that. I went to school on base though. We were not segregated on Marine bases. But then you'd go out, and then when I was in 8th grade in 1973, like my softball team on base, they were going to play the Beaufort, South Carolina softball team, but they wouldn't let us play because we had black girls on our team. So,
Yep.
well, they were like, just don't let the black girls come in. My dad was like, no,
No.
yep, we are not playing you because we are not black.
I appreciate both of you saying, being very, honest and upfront about, the role that race plays. And I try to say this as much as possible because it's so important for whites to hear this. Racism does not benefit you. It is an illusion. It has been written about so many times. It's uh, a false sense of security, and it sets you up for failure. Because if you buy into this thought process that if you just work hard, that you'll be successful, and if there are no uh, structures of benefit or anything to help you when you're down, what happens psychologically when you don't do well? Oftentimes people blame other people's, but sometimes other people. But oftentimes folk have to look themselves in the mirror and say, I'm a failure. Instead of looking at the system for being what it is, which is incredibly, 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 instead of defending a system, a white supremacist system that's incredibly unfair, folk have to indict it for what it is. I was looking at we have all this talk about inflation and things going left. And I want to pick up the phone and call one of the economists I know at Duke and say, what would average wages look like if it kept up with CEO pay from the 1970s, which has increased 1,460%
Right.
over time. And so we're frustrated. People are frustrated. So I'll go back to the point about how racism hurts you. W.E.B. Du Bois called it in 1909 the psychological wage of whiteness. And so if you're trying to maintain this hierarchy that doesn't benefit you in any kind of way, materially, when things go left, you're left with, one or two options: to look at yourself and invite yourself or blame other people. And oftentimes that gets very violent. And people die as a result. I recommend this book on my bookshelf. It's called "Dying of Whiteness." It's called authored by Jonathan Metzl. It really underscores, it takes the thesis from W.E.B. Du Bois. He's a Vanderbilt doctor, and he talks about this phenomenon. He talks about a guy who had hepatitis C, lives in Tennessee. And the author interviews him and asks him, "Hey, if you had Obamacare, you could certainly get treatment for this disease. Would you support it? He said, no, I would rather die than let Mexicans and Black people get benefit from this law. And he indeed, as the author reported, he did pass away. So he got his wish. But the book is very good in breaking down sort of the psychological uh, infection, I would say, that comes along with trying to uphold this just really false rewarding worldview. One that I think is deeply damaging to white folk, and of course damaging, to Black and brown people. But it hurts you as well. And like you said, until poor folk come together and recognize, instead of scraping by with $38,000 a year, if I held these CEOs in the system accountable, I might be making 70.
Yeah,
easily.
There's another thing that you sort of talked about there about the wall, and being white and looking like a Republican and sounding like one. I hear things, and this has been a whole life. There are the white people, by hating Black people, think Black people hate them, and white people fear Black people and you look at these gated communities and these walls around communities, and it's keeping Black people out, but it's also imprisoning those white people that they can't go out and be comfortable in society. Now, I know there a quarter of the population is Black, and white people are a little over half. So white people probably can stay in white areas, but Black people have to deal with white people all the time. White people, if they only would go out and engage with Black people, would understand that they are just people too. They got kids.
Yes, we are.
They got to go to school. They got to go to the dentist. They get runny noses and earaches, and they're human beings too. But they won't look at that because it might make them change their mind, and they're afraid of that. And it's like we were talking about, if they're afraid. It's like Robeson County is very much like this. It works on the patronage system. If you say something bad about a Republican, well, you just might not get any business, or people just might, come and look at you ugly or something. I don't know. It's really there. There are a bunch of Democrats here that are in office that will not look at me or speak to me in public because they're afraid that they'll be seen looking at me and speaking to me in public. And they may not get elected. Jared Lowry just introduced legislation in the House that is going to make our school board, the Robeson County School Board, partisan. And let me tell you, guys, Hoke in Scotland, they're going to be next because it's going there because Republicans know that they will take over that school board because they got so many people here feeling beat when we actually outnumbered them. And if people would just get up and vote in their best interest, it wouldn't be that way. But they won't. I don't know.
It's a line I remember reading it years ago. Like all good lines, I have no idea where, but it was in the upper class solidarity matters more than racial solidarity. So a rich Black man and a rich white man can be good friends, and that's more important because they're rich together. But among the lower and the middle and working classes, racial solidarity is more important than class solidarity. And if we could just look past, the different amounts of melatonin in our skin, we would realize that as the working and the middle class, we have more power and we could work together and get that done. Last episode, we had Braxton Winston on, who is the next commissioner of labor for the great state of North Carolina, and also a pretty good free throw shooter. As we learned at the free throw tournament, first annual Hoke County free throw tournament. And he had a lot of great points about our way forward for labor. And while he's doing that in the Council of State, what is Senator Batt going to be doing to push forward on labor and make North Carolina an even better place to work?
Well, that the one thing that I would start with is that ridiculous minimum wage. Now, there aren't many jobs that make people start off with $7.25 because they couldn't get anybody for it. But if we raised it to a reasonable amount, there are still people in jobs that are not like their first job that they're paying under $15. I've seen ads for, machine operator with 2 years experience, like trying to hire him for $13 an hour. I mean, that's got to change. If people make more money, they can spend more money, and that will expand the economy. Like making people try to get by on that kind of money. Like when you make $13 or even $15, if you make $15 and work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, you make about $15,000. That's it. And like, you can't have a house and feed yourself, and God help you if you had kids and you need health care and like child care and things. You're not going to make it. And that's would be my first thing, getting the minimum wage up. And then the kind of hand in hand with that, but not just minimum wage, but looking at like finding industries that can be unionized and helping them, if we can, by changing the laws, making it a more union friendly state. I mean, unions really took hold here in North Carolina and changed North Carolina for the better years and years ago. And it can do that again. Like that's with like you're talking about the extreme difference between corporate pay and labor pay. I mean, unions could be the answer to that. You've seen it in a couple places recently where that's happening. So that's what I would do. I would work with bringing the minimum wage up and working to make it more union friendly.
Music to my ears. I mean, it's so. The thing about politics today that always blows my mind is you say something that is so demonstrably true. If people have more money, they can spend more money, they can buy a home, and they can like improve the overall economic situation of the state, the country, the world. And there's 48% of the electorate that go, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe we should get rid of the minimum wage. I don't know. It's like it's hard thinking about where politics are today. Actually, William and I were chatting offline about your experiences canvassing. For those of you who have not had the joy of having Kathy Batts knock on your door yet, don't worry. If you live in District 24, she is coming for your house.
She's coming.
The most prolific canvasser I've ever met.
I love it.
But people who are just essentially voting against their own self-interest. And I don't know, how do both of you think we talk to people who, by ideology, by disposition, by their lot in life should vote Democrat to better their lives, to get the benefits of that? How do you think we talk to those voters? How do we get them, on the right team?
Well, let me just start first. Mine's going to be quick. You run into a problem out there when you talk to some people that regardless of their economic situation, they're tuned to authoritarianism. They're like those people who followed Jim Jones to Guyana and drank the Kool-Aid. They're like people that stayed in the burning building with David Koresh, and like the Mormons that hang around with the Warren Jeffs of the world. They want that. They want somebody to make everything happen, regardless of how. They don't want to make any decisions. So you've got to deal, and I have been dealing with that every time we go out. And what I do, I don't engage with that. You can't do that. But I'll say, well, what about your kids? Your kids are going to need this. So yeah, that might make you feel more secure, but is it going to feed your kids? Are you going to get your kids educated? Are you going to have health care for your kids? So just think about your kids. And that's the only thing I can think to do. William?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, wow, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's sort of shifting my response. I think there is a certain segment of the population that is going to respond to not rational policy solutions, but things that rattle their emotional saber. whether it's whatever it might be. But I was talking with Dr. Hardy, and she seemed to indicate that um, Republicans want to do things to people. They want to send them across the border. They want to stop them from being able to have free access to a healthy or to a safe abortion. They want to do things to people instead of working with people to create a society that we all can benefit from. I do think that we have to start calling people out for being broke, and I think we have to be careful. We have to say, "Man, you're broke. What are you talking about? Do you know that in your occupation and in your career, you should be, if all things were equal, with a rate of wealth?" And I don't know how you articulate this, but we got to start telling people that if you're working as an electrician's apprentice, or you're working at a retail store, instead of making $15, $18 an hour, you should be making 37. And as someone parses out that math for folks, it starts calling, it may not change your mind then. But if we start hammering the fact that unions and countries that we don't think very much of, like South Korea and Japan, have a better quality of life than ours, and they get paid X, Y, and Z, and I just think that there's something to be said about the quality of life that we're muddling through, and highlighting how much better things should be in the United States for the average American. I'm very fortunate that my wife and I have, we're blessed and we have what we need. But I think about, just the insane amount of wealth that is just floating around in this country that's locked up in offshore accounts or in the stock market. And how, if we were more intentional about, and people weren't subscribed to the system of what I call a neo-feudal system, that the wealth could be more evenly distributed. But you have to, in order, whenever we start talking about that, Republicans prey on on voters, independent and more conservative leaning voters, by saying the people, if you do that, then people who don't deserve the money, they don't deserve the wealth and the fruits of America, they'll get it too. And so what they'll end up doing is cutting their own throat to maintain a system that is legitimately oppressing them. And so I think lifting it up and calling it out again, I don't think it's going to change a lot of minds right away, but it's a seed is planted. And if someone comes and tells me, who's a reputable source, hey, you're a machine operator, instead of getting paid $13 an hour, you should get paid 30. People are going to start doing the math. And they start to think, well, hey, maybe this person is right. And so instead of, propping up a system that keeps you, scrapping, maybe you should rise up and figure out how to hold these fat cats, accountable.
Yeah. Well, I know you meant to say North Korea. You said South Korea. I only say that because in 1988 and 89, I was actually in the army in South Korea, and it was still a lot under the military rulership. And they've turned their economy and their country around. And how they did it was they liberalized, they let go, they became less authoritarian, and it helped their country become an economic powerhouse that, it's just night and day different than when I was there. And
absolutely,
we could do that. But you're like North Korea, having.
Did I say North Korea?
No, you said South, but I think you meant North, didn't you?
No, I meant South Korea. We should be more like South Korea. I meant more like South Korea, because South Korea, and the reason it tipped me off is I South Korea, like all across the peninsula, has high-speed internet. Like
Right.
high-speed internet, high quality of life.
Right.
Public transportation is just
Yeah.
a dream.
And
Just a
the
dream.
education system is like their number one priority, and that's
100.
why they're technologically advanced beyond what are, because I mean, you can't be technologically advanced if you can't read, and there are kids reading well below the state average or national average, in these, and it's no better in private schools, because I read a study that showed private school students that transition back to public school are
I'm
doing worse.
behind.
They're
100%.
doing worse than public school students. So,
You hit the nail on the head. I think we have to uplift the fact, we beat our chest. We're the biggest, best country in the world, and in a lot of metrics, we're not. And it's okay to say that, because there are other countries who have decided to invest in education and infrastructure, and they're reaping the benefits, and they will continue to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel better. We've solved the world's problems, or at least identified them.
I mean, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. So as as we move into June, we've already started hitting temperatures of 90 degrees. I am in the environmental advocacy space. That's what I do for my day job. And I'm frankly very concerned with climate change, obviously, but I'm also concerned about the outsized impact it has on communities of color and low-lying communities. In your district, it is intersected, I think, by the Cape Fear River and certainly by the Lumber River,
Right.
low-lying rivers. And when Hurricane Florence and Matthew came through 2016, 2018, it absolutely devastated South Lumberton African American, community. So as these climate disasters and climate events happen, what is your thought as we are on the cusp of, well, we're not on the cusp anymore, but we're in the middle of just, generational investment in climate technology, grants every other day, really focusing on transforming local economies around climate change. I think it's an opportunity for communities who want to embrace it. What do you see in terms of opportunity around economic development for Southeastern North Carolina?
Well, I actually went with Carol Richardson's group down to talk in Wilmington at the Duke Power hearing down there. Where they are closing the coal plants, which is good, but their carbon plan, they were supposed to be moving more towards renewables, and the argument was that it wasn't reliable. So when I spoke, I talked about like California. They've got the next generation batteries out there that actually do keep the lights on when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. We are there. And at Duke Power, I didn't see anything about them like incorporating like that if they're worried about and propane if they're worried about like keeping the lights on, because they're a monopoly here. 100%
Sure.
of responsibility for them that they got to keep the lights on. But they could combine those, and like propane is about half the amount of carbon that coal is, so that's good, and they could cut that down more. But funny thing is like I was in your Hoke County Board of Commissioners just like week before last, and there was a solar company there wanted to get zoning to put in another solar field. And that guy, I think the guy that was there talking was actually at the hearing, and he wanted my card. He said he was going to call me, but he hadn't called me yet. But I think he might be waiting to see if I get elected and can cause them some trouble. But I do truly believe that is something that we could, in a rural country, county, we could get more like invested in that, because we have some land that we could use. And yeah, there's some environmental, but it's not as bad as an environmental impact of like that that one company that's making wood pellets, cutting down on
Eviva. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and they put it into a brown field. Yeah, they built it on a brown field, like a polluted area. And every time they have a wastewater overwash, it washes that stuff down into the Lumber River, and they don't have to clean it up. Like we gotta. Yeah, everybody, we need jobs. I get it. We need jobs, but we need to really be smarter about it. Like these chicken plants, they can make a chicken plant and a hog plant where the wastewater is treated before it's released. It doesn't have to be like dumped straight into the watershed. Like they can do that stuff. And some of it's being done here in these counties, but some are still grandfathered in where they just pile up the poop somewhere and let the rain go on it, just washes it away. So that's the problem. Like we're killing ourselves with what we're trying to do quick and easy when we should take the longer road and find industries that are willing to work within a reasonable boundary of, like, when they leave, everybody here isn't going to be like generations being sick and dying because of what they did. Like we gotta get to that. And again, it goes to education. We're not going to get a chip plant built here because our education system is so poor. If they did, they would bring the workers in and none of us would get that job, so we got to look education. It's
education. No, we got to have it. And I appreciate you saying that. Like, one of the things when I first started working in my field, the first thing someone told me was, Duke Energy is not so much an energy company is a construction company. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange. Its first interest is returning value to shareholders.
Right.
And so it doesn't make money off of rates as much as it makes money off of return on investment, which means they have to build things.
Yeah.
And I think their return on investment is like 11 or 12% on everything that they build. So it makes much more sense for them to build a nuclear plant. It makes much more sense for them to build a methane gas plant, than it does for them to build a solar field, which is once you build that, it's good for 25 years, low maintenance.
Right.
But we have to think about the kind of impact these methane gas plants, particulate matter, and all these other things, not to mention the amount of carbon that we're emitting into the atmosphere and warming up the planet. So we have to call a spade and recognize what Duke is. And think about and the common refrains for so many years was that solar and renewables were so much more expensive than methane and other fossil fuels. That's no longer the case with the war in Ukraine and the fluctuating, the volatility. Natural gas can be this one day and the next. As long as I'm concerned, once you get the silicone and the panels, on the ground, that cost is fixed moving forward.
Right.
So it's like you said earlier, it's an incredible opportunity for us to be thinking about how to get more energy independence. I think, frankly, we have to challenge this monopoly model with Duke and think about, because, their interest is first maintaining their own existence and then returning. And that's not going to always sync with the good of the people. So I'll stop there. You go forever, but let me stop.
And politics plays a part too. Like, you got people in the legislature putting money in their pockets by passing bills that help them. Like some state senator might have a DUI, and there's legislation right now that's saying, oh, we're going to expunge that DUI, after a certain amount of time. And who's that going to help? It's going to help that politician that has the DUI and wants to go on. And there's legislation that says, hey, insurance rates are too low. And that's because defense attorneys, it doesn't bring sense for them to make the case for insurance because the rate of return is so low. So they want to raise that to one of the highest in the country. And it's so that those defense attorneys can make more money when they sue people, and that's what it is. I mean, you can look, you can see these crazy laws coming through, absolutely against the public interest and in the public and in the private
private,
whatever I'm trying to say, interest, private
politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just saying.
No, you're exactly right. I think y'all are, again, saw the world's problem for the second time. But just laid it out. Like, we're not going to be competitive. You brought up the war in Ukraine, the effect on national gas prices.
Right.
But to bring up the other sort of great geopolitical adversary, like the Chinese are producing more solar panels than the United States and the European Union combined, year on year on year on year. Like, if you actually have genuine concern about like America's place in the world and fighting climate change isn't your first or second biggest issue, you're out of your mind. If you don't like the immigration issues at the southern border and climate change isn't top of mind, you're just fooling yourself. Like, it's insane, and it's insane that it keeps happening. But it's our job as Democrats to beat the drum. We talked a little bit before we started recording, but on insane things happening in the state legislature right now. The anti-masking bill, even for public health interest, for people who are immunocompromised, soon to be Senator Batt. Good thing or bad thing?
Well, it's not going to happen. They voted it down. It started in the House, was passed over to the Senate, who passed it with some changes, went back to the House, and because of the incredible nationwide outcry at this, they've dropped it, or tabled it. It may rear its ugly head later, but right now we don't have to worry about that. That's in the back burner now. So we did good. We can all applaud ourselves.
We did
Rare
it.
Good news. Some rare good news out of the legislature. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Unless there's anything else y'all want to talk about.
I'm good.
I have enjoyed this. It's been great, laying it all out. I think we have to say the hard things. And I really enjoyed doing that with you, ma'am.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, thank you for joining us today. You brought us a lot to think about. I hope our listeners got a lot out of this, learned a little bit more about you. If they want to continue to learn more, they want to volunteer and stay up with you and your indefatigable door knocking, where can they find more out about your campaign and how to support you?
If you go on battforsenate.com, that's me, BATT 4 Senate, SENATE.com. There's a contact page. You can get me on that. You can hit me up on Facebook at Kathy Batt for NC Senate, or Twitter at Kathy, KATHY 4 NC SENATE Senate. You can hit me up on any of those. I've got cards out there. You can probably even Google me and find out how to get a hold of me. I seem to be everywhere now, shooting baskets and everything.
I was about to say, because I wanted to say to our audience, Kathy's an incredible basketball player. She did her thing. I think you missed 2 and then went 8 in a row. It was beautiful. So I have it on video. I'm going to have to put it out. Man, that was so much fun. That's fun. One thing the Hoke Dems are going to do is, I was talking with my friend from South Carolina. He was like, man, you're not going to out-angry the Republicans, but you can outjoy them. And we're going to have to reflect the joy that we have in the society that we want to see. That's right. And people gravitate to that. And that's all that we can do. The Republicans are mad because the world is changing and they have no control over the changing world. But we're going to embrace the changes in the progression of of mankind. And we're going to make this world better for everyone. And that's what we have to embrace, whether it's playing basketball, playing soccer, cooking a pig, whatever it is. We're going to have fun doing it, and we're going to do it in the name of society. And if we have to be the only people with a Democrat with our ideological badge on, we'll do it. We'll be the Democrats representing society. And if they want to, burn effigies of Michael Pence, let them do it. That's going to get old at some point. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. And if you can think of anything you want me to talk about, maybe we can talk about the state of being a woman in North Carolina next down the road. So
we'll have you back.
That's a great point.
I'm an expert.
Something that William and I guess probably don't think about enough. Ooh. All right,
that's right.
Always
we'll have you back in August.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Kathy, for joining us. Be sure to follow us for more discussions on the policies and people shaping North Carolina's future. Until next time, stay informed and keep striving for a better tomorrow.